So the purpose of this video is to show the making of a wedding goblet. In this case I'll be making a matching goblet for one that I've already made using a piece of plumwood from one of the trees in our yard. As you can see, I've marked the center here. It's a little bit off the pith because that's where it tends to crack, so I don't want that in the middle. I first start by mounting it between centers on the lathe. And then I'm just going to rough it down a little bit, and I'm going to put a tenon on so I can put it into a chuck for most of the turning. When I rough it out, I'm going to leave the bark at one end because that's going to form the rim of the goblet. So here it is going in the chuck. And now I'm using a template just to mark out a few key features that I want to start roughing in. For most of this turning, I like to use a skew. It's just what I'm comfortable with, and I like the finish that it gives. Certainly a spindle gouge can be used if you so desire. Now that I've got some features roughed in, I'm going to drill out the center for the cup to give me a depth gauge, and then I'm going to start the hollowing process. Because it's a natural edge, I don't really know where the rim is going to be until I've started hollowing. So I just hollow out this part enough to see where that is going to be. And then once it's started, I'll go back and continue refining the outside of the shape before I hollow out the whole thing. A little bit of CA glue here helps to just reinforce the bark and keep it on the piece. So just having a few spots on a template that you can measure to, and then work towards that spot. It helps to make two goblets sort of look the same, even though most of it's freehand. There's a lot of starting and stopping while I'm working on the cup here because I'm checking to see if checking the strip of bark at the rim, because I want that to be a nice, even, fairly even thickness, matching the other goblet. And I can't really see that when the lathe is spinning, so it means a lot of starting and stopping while I'm doing this part. Once I've got this cup, the outside of the cup for the goblet finished and in the shape that I want, I'm going to go back and start doing the hollowing. I'm not going to take it down too thin on the stem because I need some thickness there to give it strength and stability while I'm doing the hollowing, but it needs to be far enough in that I can have an idea of the wall thickness while I'm hollowing. So here I'm getting ready to go back and finish hollowing the cup. You can see I've got a steady rest on it now. This is so that any pressure from the hollowing cuts won't throw it out of the chuck. Now the hollowing is complete, so I stuff a rag into the cup so I can bring up the tailstock and help keep it stable for the rest of the turning. And now I'm going to start working on the stem. And first I start by bringing it down to the diameter that I want the rings on the goblet to be. So that's what I've measured there, and I'm working to bring it down. Once that's done, I need to give myself a little bit of space next to the cups to get my tool in and be able to work. And the first step of making the ring is to form a bead. If something goes wrong, you get a catch, whatever, you've got the whole stem to play with, so just cut it off, start a new one. There's special ring tools for cutting these rings, but I find that a screwdriver that I bought from the dollar store and ground to the shape that I like for it works just fine for cutting out the bottom of the rings. You'll notice that I did the sanding before cutting the ring off the stem. It's an important step because once those rings are loose, it's very difficult to do the sanding. So do your sanding and then do your final cuts to free it. Now I've got the two rings formed, so I'm going to just continue refining the stem into the shape that I want it to be. So the stem is now done, and I'm going to start shaping the foot. And preparing to clearing out some space to part it off later. Now, for sanding the inside of the stems, the trick for doing that is to tape your sandpaper to the stem. You have to be careful which way you wrap the sandpaper around the stem. So if you do it one way, it's going to get torn off every time you turn the lathe on. Do it the right way and it gets tighter, and you can do your sanding pretty easily. I'm only showing one grit here, but I worked my way up through all the grits, starting at I believe about 120 and going up to 600. And now that that's done, it can be parted off, and then there's a bit of cleaning up to do on the base, and you can see it's a pretty good match for the first goblet.